Hello, hello. How's it going, Grace?
Hi, Chrissy. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Nice
Good
little sunny
morning.
day here in Vancouver. Yeah, good
Yeah.
morning or good afternoon.
It's still morning here as well. I feel like you've had an earlier morning than I have. It's 11 a.m. here in New York, so right into the day already.
Yeah, 8 a.m. here in Vancouver.
Bright and
Um,
early. You're looking fresh.
Thanks, you too. Um, Good morning or hello to everyone that's joining us live. We're going to wait just about 30 seconds or so to welcome some of our friends for the Selling Power of Influencers session that we're hosting this morning. So yeah, we'll give it another 10 seconds or so.
Let everyone roll in.
Yeah, I wish we could see on the side here where everyone was coming in from.
Oh yeah, I know. We can't see the little stream of hellos and locations, but I'm sure we
Yeah,
have people from all over, so it's
yes,
exciting.
so exciting. Okay, well, let's just hop in here. It's just 1 minute past. So just to set the scene, I'm Chrissy Abram, and I manage influencer marketing and PR for Later. And I am on screen with Grace Murray from Fohr. Grace, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Murray. I'm the Vice President of Strategy at Fohr. We are an influencer marketing company. We're an ambassador marketing company. We have tech, we have managed services, we have free tools for influencers. And we've been working on this report with Later now for a couple of weeks, and we're so excited about it. So I'm excited to chat to you, Chrissy.
Yeah, likewise, Grace. I know. So we created this report in collaboration together, and it's our second time doing something like this, I believe.
Yeah, we did one I didn't even know if it definitely wasn't last year. We did one, I think, the year before, that was a state of influencer marketing. So it's been a minute since we've last done some collaboration, but it's been really exciting to see it all come together and see the results that we've pulled in and the insights that our team have collaborated on. So always a pleasure working with the Later team.
Awesome, likewise. So today we're going to be talking about the selling power of influencers. And this report, what we did was we looked at over 3.5 million Instagram posts and tried to understand the correlation between follower count, likes, reach, saves, and what that actually all meant. So Grace and I are on here today because we specifically have an invested interest in influencer marketing and strategy, something like we like to talk about a lot. So just to set the stage a little bit, our industry, the influencer marketing industry, went through a little bit of a roller coaster situation last year, to say the least. So Grace, do you want to touch on that and just sharing a little bit of what we actually experienced?
Definitely. I mean, roller coaster, I think, is definitely putting it lightly. I remember first day of working remotely, and it was just a barrage of clients and brands on text and email and DM and calling, just basically saying, we need to put everything on hold. We're, getting all of this direction that our budgets are locked and that we shouldn't be advertising anything, basically, which is something that so many industries went through, given it was a global pandemic and none of us knew what was going to happen. Never any more uncertainty than there was last year. But, it's something that makes sense, right? That you would put all of that on hold. If you're talking to your boss about a budget that could go to your influencer campaign, or it could be protecting your salary or someone on your team's salary, that's a pretty easy choice at that time. So it was very much like batten down the hatches. Let's fielding a lot of anxiety from both brands and influencers in that time. And we did see, so in the report, we analyzed those 3.5 million posts that you mentioned. As part of that analysis, we actually looked at mentions of ad and sponsored to see what the data showed of, it not just being the campaigns that we're experiencing of having those holds, but also looking at the landscape more broadly and seeing that there was actually a 40% year over year, or I believe it was 42% year over year decline in sponsored posts. So, pretty insane in such a rapidly growing industry, but it completely makes sense. Everyone had to put everything on hold. Consumers weren't spending money. We were all sitting at home in our sweats wondering what the hell was going to go on. But I think something that is interesting for the influencer industry specifically is how quickly it rebounded. So you can see that there's a nearly 23% year over year increase later on in the year, so in Q4. So it's not just that we were increasing from that really tough time in the year in the industry, but looking at the year prior, the rebound was wild. And
that's
why is that?
Holiday, right?
Sorry?
We saw that around the holiday season, right?
Exactly. So the holiday season bounced back in a big way. And again, not just in comparison to the months prior, but in comparison to the year before as well. And I think, it just took brands a minute to catch back up to what was going on, because despite everyone being fearful about where they should be making investments on behalf of their brands, also Instagram usage was up 40% during the height of the pandemic. So all of the eyeballs were on Instagram and on influencers and on, we all just wanted to be entertained by people who were going through a similar thing to us, instead of, I know I had feelings of watching TV and seeing people like hanging out in dive bars and being too close to each other and being like, oh, this is just too much for me right now. You wanted to see people who are going through a similar thing to you. And so I think that's what was so interesting about the influencer space is influencers really kept so many people entertained and feeling connected and understanding how to do their at-home workouts and what to cook and how to cope. And so it just took brands a minute to catch up to that. But knowing that there was so little else that brands could be doing, and I think it really showed how many hats influencers wear when you can't, do a photo shoot with 50 people, or you can't promote at an event. All of those brands were turning to influencers, and that's what we saw in the numbers in Q4.
Yeah, it definitely revealed a lot of what the influencers take on a day-to-day basis, didn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Many hats.
So many hats. So the report is, I believe it's a 36-page report. And I know you and I both have had the opportunity to go through it. And for those that are listening that potentially haven't seen it yet, it is in your inbox if you're a later subscriber. And if not, you can just go to the .com and download it yourself. But one of the things that stood out to me in the report, and I know it's been a massive topic of conversation, catching some heat on Instagram, the save rates. Everyone was talking about save rates. There was memes about save rates. There were stories about save rates. Are save rates the new thing? And it was interesting looking at the report where I think it was 0.07 of all posts are saved. So not a ton.
Not a lot.
We're not reaching for like thousands of saves. And it kind of makes sense. But my big takeaway, which came from you in the report, was, okay, if we're not looking for the thousands of saved posts as a signal to what we should be creating more on social or what resonates with our audience, what can we do with it?
Yeah, I mean, saves I think is just so interesting because there's a low number of saves on average, as you see in the report, but a save feels so much more special and meaningful than just a like or a comment. A save is showing a brand or showing whoever is on the receiving end of that this consumer wants to come back to this content. So not only have they enjoyed it, they're saving it. They want to come back. So it's like a super like. We see that the content that's saved the most is content that's really helpful to people. So content that focus on tips or hacks or insights, or products that people maybe want to come back to and say, like, this is something that I'm considering buying. I do want to bookmark it and come back to it. So it is a really good indicator of intent to buy because, again, you're coming back to that content. So for us, I don't think it's as much about trying to focus singularly on saves as one of our metrics. It's one that we really like to pay attention to because it does feel so meaningful. Like, I know if I get, one save versus 100 likes. I'm like, who saved it? Why did they save it?
Don't you want to know too?
Yeah, you want to know. I'm sure there's like an app out there that can probably try and, help you do that. But it's something that it's meaningful. It shows that, again, that intent to buy, and that it's something that that means something to people. So I think it's definitely an interesting metric. It's one that's few and far between, but it is interesting to look at and see what drives that up, which is, again, content that people are really wanting to come back to.
Yeah, and I think too, if you're a small business or a brand, it's something to double click on and look at what about that post or that copy or that product in that post really resonated, where people actually wanted to save it. And maybe opening up a conversation to your community about it, or doubling down and creating more content about it to see if it wasn't just a one-off.
Exactly. Well, I think that kind of leads perfectly into some of the things that we've been talking about too, as any brand starts to think through who they should be working with and how they should be investing in influencers and what they can do, and if it's nano influencers or if it's macro influencers, or where they should invest their money. And you just referenced, trying to replicate something that has already worked, seeing what you can learn, doing a little bit of testing and learning. And I think that is so fundamental to being successful in influencer marketing or ambassador marketing. And when thinking about, whether I'm a small brand that has a little budget that I'm really protective of, or a larger brand that has a lot of pressure on the decisions that I'm making and proving value, you really want to know what's going to work before you kind of put all your chips to the middle of the table. Like, this isn't Vegas. Like, you don't want to just say, like, let's go all in and put it all on red and jump from 0 to 100 and go with a macro influencer or a mega influencer when we don't really know what works yet. It is a complex industry. It's something that you do have to kind of tinker around and play with different messaging and different content creators, and see what works and see what's driving strong performance across the metrics that you care about, depending on what your goals are. And once you have that proven theory, then you can kind of, jump into the big leagues and start investing more if that's what makes sense to you. But to kind of jump from 0 to 100, it's like, let's just walk before we run and test, prove, learn, and then put it all into the middle of the table after that.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that, because I also, within that, I've learned so much with that strategy of just test little things before you actually, as you say, push the chips into the middle of the table. Because sometimes I have the audacity to be like, I know how this is going to turn out. And then I'm wooed by what I actually find out, and my whole strategy changes. It's happened so many times.
Absolutely. And you're not alone, that's most brands, and there's horror stories out there of like, oh, we invested all of this money in this influencer and nothing happened. There's also, on the flip side of that, stories of, oh, we worked with this person who was a nano influencer or a micro influencer, and we saw stronger results than someone over here in that much larger bucket. So I think a key piece of it is that understanding of what are the levers, what are the variables, what are the controls, and how can we play around to test theories, prove them, and then continue to scale them up from there. Because, we touched on this in the report, but nano influencers are reaching around 30% of their audience, 33% on average, with every post that they create. Macro and mega influencers, it's much lower. It's 10% or less. But if you actually compare the volume of people that you're reaching and the investment that you're putting forward when working with those two groups, you really, if you're thinking about it purely from an investment standpoint, you would never, if you don't know anything about investing, you would never just take all of your savings and put it straight into that, one place. You would dabble around and see what works, and then once you have something that's really working for you, you kind of put more into it. So I think that's definitely all key.
Yeah, I think the point too around reach, because sometimes it sits without a definition, or for those friends that are on this call that are new to these words. The analogy that I love to use, and I use quite often at work, is you walk into a house party, and I can't wait until we can do that again. But
Ready.
you walk into a house party, and if you're a nano influencer, so you have a smaller size following, and you say hello and how's it going to everyone, or a good percentage, 33%, will hear your hello. Mm-hmm. You walk into a massive house party and there's thousands of people there and you say hello and how's it going, and a smaller percentage will actually hear you say hello, how's it going.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. It's a little tangential, but I have a house party analogy as well that I was chatting through with someone internally the other day, which was about TikTok versus Instagram, and about the fact that on TikTok, you really, because the landscape on TikTok is so, sponsored content can either go really well or really poorly, and you really have to be able to show you can hang, so to speak. And so we were using the analogy that if it's a party and you're a brand, you're not going into the party to change the music and, get on a microphone and change the vibe. You are coming to show that you can hang out at the party and show that you're, in the mix, and that you're not trying to kind of jump in and change things. So same wavelength with the house party analogies.
I like it, Grace. Well, let's just dive in then to that topic. So I think we have a slide in the mix here. Yes, thanks, Christine. Christine's our social media manager behind the scenes here, where it goes through a little bit more about what we actually mean when we use the word nano influencer, macro influencer, mega macro influencer. Mm-hmm. Grace and I decided today we're specifically going to be speaking about the nano influencer and the macro influencer, because if you're on social or if you're in the world of influencer marketing, nano and our macro influencers get a lot of airtime, and there's kind of this trying to uncover when to best partner with different influencers based on your company's objectives. I always, when I'm chatting with companies or businesses, that's the first question I ask. What's our objective here? Is it brand awareness? Is it driving traffic? Are we looking for conversion? Are we looking to grow a community online? Because it really changes our strategy and who we partner with. So, Grace, do you want to dive into when do we actually, based on the report and what we've uncovered, when do we actually benefit from partnering with a nano influencer or a macro influencer?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing, again, before we dive into a lot of it, is just that walk before you can run principle, I think, holds regardless of what your eventual strategy is going to be, because you do want to do a bit of testing and proving first. But if you already feel like you're in a good place there, a couple of different times and places where it might make sense to work with a nano influencer versus a macro influencer. So nano influencers, amazing if you are looking for content production. If content production is one of your main goals, your budget's going to go further. You're going to get more points of view, more interesting storytelling, more variety in content when you're taking your budget and you are working with a group of people with smaller audiences and therefore lower rates. Engagement rates and reach rates for that nano influencer tier, again, are really strong comparatively from an averages standpoint. So it's around, again, 33% is what on average a nano influencer is reaching of their audience. So that can be great if you're, trying to create some groundswell, if you're working with a relatively limited budget, if you are a small brand who is gifting influencers. I think it is important to understand that the landscape means that a lot of those larger influencers aren't really doing gifting collaborations anymore. So nano influencers can be a great place to start. But really there's so much that you can do there. And I think for bigger brands, it's a case of understanding how can I cultivate this community of nano influencers who are really high performing and who are creating this incredible bank of content, but also make sure that my team and my own time is the level of effort matches up with the return that we're getting or the volume of people that we're reaching. Because I think in looking at it percentages, the percentages are really strong, but it's still important to assess, a way that the later team contextualized the data in the report is that you would have to work with 25 nano influencers to work with someone who's at that, to equate to someone who's at that kind of 500K level. So there's a big payoff in terms of time expenditure if you're going to go down that path. A lot of benefits, but it is just more work. And then on the upper end, if you have, again, you're in that place where you really are confident that you know what works for your brand, you've tested some messaging or you've seen results from other campaigns, and you're like, yep, we feel like we almost have a formula for what's going to work here. Not to say we're going to be super prescriptive with all of this, but we understand the type of person we're going for. We understand what they care about and what matters to them. We understand what messages and what type of post resonate with our audience to make sure that the post is about our brand and our product in some way while still giving the audience what they came for. That's when it's a great time to go for someone larger, because you're able to scale what you've already learned. You're able to reach so many people in a short burst of time. And you're really able to get some credibility and cachet that is tough to put a number on, but it is something that is inbuilt. If someone has 1 million followers, it's easy to forget that there's a reason that there's 1 million people following that person. That's a huge audience to have built and to maintain and a community to cultivate. So there's a lot of power and a lot of reach that can come with that.
Yeah. You also, I think, touched on something that I love. It's one of Grace's expressions that I always keep in my back pocket, where it's build the sandbox and let the influencers or content creators play within it. And I think it goes back to what you were just saying about, walk before you run. So as we're looking at partnering with, whether it be the one macro influencer or the 25 nano influencers, I think the brands listening too, it's really important that we actually set our content creators up for success in the sense that we do create that statement of work that's super clear in terms of the messaging we're looking for, and the call to action, the CTA, whatever that might be. So when that experiment is done, if this is the first time you're trying it on, we can actually go back and look at, okay, what worked, what didn't, and was it, did we partner with influencers that had an audience that resonated with our brand, or was it the messaging that was a little off, or was the call to action not super clear? You actually get to see, okay, we'll change this out, we'll change that out. So it's really, really important, whether you work with the big ones or, the 25 smaller follower count, to have that statement of work to refer back to.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. And I love, Chrissy, you're pulling in a little tidbit from our last chat, the build the fence and let them play. Yeah. That's something that I come back to, and I shouldn't claim it as exclusively my own. I think someone else on our team probably came up with that. But I think the key thing that's really important to me in that is that, to me, this industry really needs to be understood by both sides, by influencers and brands, as results and humanity. You need both. You need, as an influencer, you need to understand, yes, I'm a storyteller. Yes, I'm a content creator. Yes, I'm here to serve my audience, and brands are potentially part of my revenue stream, but really I'm here to serve my audience. But you need to understand that if you're working with a brand, they're still going to need to see that this worked. And in however we're defining that based on, the goals of the campaign. And from the brand side, brands really need to understand that these are humans and that these are human communities. So it's always that balance of both. And I think that is where, for me, the build a fence and let them play within it comes into play, because it's our job as marketers and as brands and as agencies to understand what we need and understand what that fence is, and be really clear about that in the upfront. So then there can be creative interpretation in that process. So an example that we have that's a really fun one from a recent collaboration is that we wanted to do some test and learning on TikTok because we had a brand, OXO, that was just interested in dipping their toes there. And it was a little outside of the norm of what we generally did, but there's this account called Sync Reviews that's insanely viral, and it has never done a sponsored post before. It only started at the end of last year, and it now has nearly 900,000 followers. It's crazy. And for anyone who has not seen it, literally just Sync Reviews on TikTok. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a man reviewing sinks around New York City. And we were like, this is very strange, really niche, but we want to do something fun and we want to test this out, and we want to see if this brand, OXO, who has over 30 sink products, it felt like a match made in heaven of like, you're a homewares company, you're a sink man. Let's like do a little test here, see if it works, and then just see what we can learn from it. But we had to walk into it knowing that was such a hyper niche account, and on TikTok where consumers are so much more likely to just say, I hate this. Why is this brand working with you? Or why are you working with this brand? We knew that we needed to give him a huge amount of creative control, but we also knew that we were taking the brand's investment and we needed to understand what were our must-haves in that content to make it worthwhile. So the fence was, we need 3 audible mentions of OXO. We need the products to be visibly displayed throughout. We need a mention in there about how many sink-specific products that this brand OXO has, because we want it to be a clear takeaway of like, this is a brand that does kitchen products. It's for you. It makes sense within this creative construct. And it could have gone incredibly wrong, because if we didn't give that creative liberty, it would have risked becoming a really forced piece of content, and the audience would have felt gypped and like, hey, I didn't come here to be advertised to, especially again on TikTok. But instead, because we gave so much creative control, we were clear about our expectations and clear about what we would need from a fence standpoint. It ended up being incredibly high performing. There were literally comments in the comment stream saying like, this is a genius sponsored ad. There was one that said, from reviewing sinks to sinking in money, we love to see it. It was all like his whole following were just really excited that he had this collaboration and that they were still entertained, and it wasn't an interruption to their entertainment. It was just the brand being incorporated into it. So I think that's, to me, a really funny and compelling example of like the value in that. And there was one comment that I felt like I must have secretly written in my sleep, because it was like it was a consumer basically being like, I am literally reacting to a key message. I am like, they were like, I was pronouncing it OXO this whole time. Wow, thank you, Sync Reviews. Like, it's just an unbelievable example of the type of thing that's possible when you do give that creative control, but you also understand that, there are needs and we need to drive results as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. Sometimes I think I do this too. I forget how much time, that the content creators or the business owners, are on social interacting with their customers and their community. And we need to put a lot of onus on that, thinking they know best, create that playground and build the fence and let them have at it. Because that's, at the end of the day, the community that we spent so much time cultivating.
Absolutely.
Okay, Grace, I have another question for you. So how can brands find nano influencers? I know you have little nuggets here, so I'm going to let you take it away.
Yes, got some little nuggets for you. So I think the first would be a shameless plug. If you are a brand that is at a point where, you do have a little bit of budget, you're feeling like you understand what's working and you're gaining some traction with your current strategy, but you kind of have that feeling of like, I wish I could clone myself and I wish I could do more in the day so I can scale out what I'm doing. If you're in that position and you're ready to invest and you're seeing success with what you're doing directly, we have a huge amount of technology and services available at Fohr. So I would definitely recommend checking checking us out. It does, again, just allow you to be a little bit of a superhuman version of yourself, because it's a toolbox that can be used in so many different ways.
Add to that, just knowing the background of the tech. One of the things that's probably like my pull my hair out moments is when I have an influencer do, I don't know, 5 stories about later. And then I know when they post, so I go on and like screen record or watch the story. And I love the fact that Fohr saves stories for you to view later. So if you want to create reports or look back at how many views you had, or the story itself and what worked, it's brilliant in the sense it saves it in the back end. So just a little.
I love it. I love it. Hype woman, that's great. So yeah, there's so many things that you can do that just makes it so much easier. You can reach out to so many people at once. You can identify people based on things that they're already talking about. But if that's not possible yet, and that's okay, you know, a lot of brands aren't yet in that position where they're ready to invest in that type of a service or technology. There are a lot of other things that you can do. So I have 3 main things that I want to kind of give you as little tips. So the first one is to start by looking in your backyard. So who are your most influential customers or people who already love your brand? If you're thinking about nano influencers, the odds are that you already have some of those in your customer base who are legitimately lovers of your brand and already know it and understand it. So how can you invest more in them and bring them more value so they bring you more value? I think sometimes there's a bit of a fear of like, well, if they're posting about us for free, shouldn't we kind of divert our attention over here? But it's like, no, well, you can still cultivate that relationship. You can still invest more into it to ultimately be able to get more back. So, you know, if you can help it, avoid spending good money on fake love and invest in invest in your backyard, basically. Second tip is to have a little peep over the fence and see what is happening next door. So by that, I do not mean copy your competitors. I think we all need to just be better than copying our competitors. But what are some brands who you feel like have a really similar tone or target, or your exact customer is their exact customer? Who are they working with? If it's a small brand or a larger brand, the odds are that if you go into their tagged mentions even to see, okay, who has tagged them and who is mentioning them, there's going to be a ton of nano influencers in there. An example is one of my clients is Supergoop, and to me, their customer is someone who, when they're working out, they might wear Outdoor Voices. So I could use the Outdoor Voices ambassador hashtag, which is OV ambassador, to see who they're working with and identify people with the mentality of, okay, I don't want to just search skincare because it's too broad. I want people who have this like personality and persona that match my brand. So peep over the fence, think about brands, big or small, that align with yours, and just go through their tagged mentions if you don't have the budget available yet to be investing in technology or services to help you find people. And the third one is a really tactical one, which again, it's not as beautiful as our Fohr platform and it's not as robust, but a little hack for you if you're just needing a little hack in your small business. There's a free site out there called Search My Bio. It's not foolproof, but it can be helpful as just like a first step of, you've got to be strategic about what would the person that I am looking for, what would they have in their bio, but it can be helpful. I've used it before to find people who are based in specific colleges, as an example. So that's like a really niche one. But yeah, I'd say start in your backyard, look at the neighbors, and then beyond that, if you're looking for the cool kids who are Gen Z, I would search Savage Fenty. They are all there. So, just play around, explore. There's a lot that you can find just through really understanding your brand persona and building out a little bit of an archetype and saying, who is my customer? Where do they work out? What do they care about? What do they eat? What do they wear? And using that to help guide your search.
I love that. I absolutely love the peep over the fence. It also makes me just want a peep because Easter just happened. So
amazing.
The one thing too that I think I would add to that is there's an opportunity for brands to be bold and put the ask out there. So if you do have a social media platform, whether it be 100 followers, you're just starting out, or you have thousands, what about using that question box that Instagram gives us and asking, who should we be following? Who should we know about? Are you a big lover of our brand? Do you use our products? What do you think about them? And I think sometimes when we can crowdsource some people too about, we just don't know what we don't know. So on the audience that you already have, as if they're your friend that you're having a cup of coffee with, being like, who should we partner with? Who would you love to see?
Absolutely.
That can help too.
I 100% agree with that. And, your customers will be following people who that can be your greatest source of finding people that you should know about. So, no, I love that. That's a great suggestion.
So the last question, it's a little bit more tactical. With nano influencers, so the smaller following, we're not privy to the swipe ups and the anywhere where you can put affiliate links or the click throughs. So I think it might be supportive to go back to, building that fence, and then what can we ask that's tactical that influencers or nano influencers can do. So if you don't have the high following or ability to have the click-through links, one of the things I was actually thinking about, and it's a shameless later plug, but here we are, we have the link in bio. And I'm actually helping another brand, a jewelry business, and she doesn't have the massive following yet. So we've started to implement link in bio, where it is just a mirror image of your grid, and you can have the opportunity to put a URL in there. So if there is a brand that sends you a unique tracking link, then you can drop that in there. And if someone clicks on that post, it will redirect them to whatever page you want them to go to. So it could be shoppable, or for example, Well and Good actually uses it, and it drives the readers to a certain blog post or a certain person's page. So that's just one example where I think if you're working with someone with a smaller following, how you can get around what Instagram is not giving us.
They make it fun, don't they?
Oh yeah,
they make it fun. They keep us just on our toes. So
yeah, and then the second one that I was thinking about too was, how can we use our highlight reels more? I tend to go to a lot of people's highlight reels and click on their saves. And I'm using Lindsay's here, which Lindsay's on our social media team. And I think if we can actually, we're talking about a brand or maybe a certain category that we're passionate about, creating a highlight reel about it. So if you're working, for example, with like a skincare line, and you have the skincare lines, the brand as the title, and maybe it's your wash routine on how you use that skincare and what it looks like, and just some fun facts about it. So if you're doing your stories, then you can't say swipe up. You can say, check out my highlights and learn more. Just another option.
Absolutely. And that means a lot to brands too. Like that's something that is, we've said before a lot, that the specific is universal. I think you and I have talked about this, Chrissy, before, but sometimes for brands, the numbers become so large and so abstract that sometimes seeing someone go above and beyond on the original ask, or, getting an interesting comment that shows that this is working, that can be more meaningful to a brand than seeing the huge volume of likes or the big reach numbers or whatever it might be. So if there's influencers watching, like that's definitely nano influencers watching, seeing a highlight for a brand is huge. It's something that it's not something that is super common in terms of larger paid contracts to be able to have a highlight living on your profile for a long time. It's something that definitely comes at a pretty penny. So that's definitely a way to be driving more value for brands if you're a nano influencer.
Totally. Well, I could talk to you forever, but I think we should get into our Q&As. I'm seeing a whole bunch pop up here. So one of the questions that maybe we can talk a little bit about is, should my brand with lifestyle or work with lifestyle influencers or niche down? How do I figure out if they'd make an impact for my brand?
Yeah, so to just confirm, so lifestyle broadly versus getting into more niche categories. I think, so this is potentially an annoying answer, but I do think it depends, and the best way to figure that out is through some testing and learning. So as much as we have so many best practices and so many learnings, and there's so much information even in this report that we've done with Leda, there's also, this is a very complex and nuanced industry with so many different levers and so many different strategies and approaches that you can put in place. So I think it is, first thing is that it's a complicated industry. So it depends on your brand. It depends on, the message of your brand and how it lands with different people. I think instead of going straight to, should it be this influencer or this influencer, maybe peel it back and say, okay, I understand that this is a complicated industry, so I need to simplify it. What is interesting about my product? Who responds to it most positively? Like, who is into my product the most? And what does it sound like or look like when that person, what do they need in order to be intrigued by it? And I think that mentality of kind of saying who, how, and why before thinking, is it this influencer or is it this influencer, is a good place to begin, because then it can kind of help you understand, like, okay, well, my product does actually really service this niche community. So instead of just kind of going really broadly, I'm going to do a really focused test and invest in this niche community and see if it pays off. And, if that's your instinct that your product is built for this niche community, that's probably a better way to go than going more broadly. So I think it is just about peeling it back to those more specific questions about your brand, then testing and learning, and then, getting the lay of the land as to what's working.
That's great. I love that. I'm very much on board with the experimentation mentality.
Definitely. Again, not Vegas.
Yes.
And a lot of big brands in this industry are still treating it like that. And it has to be more thoughtful and measured, and the learnings should compound over time. We still get briefs all the time where we have no learnings from prior campaigns. We're starting from zero. We don't understand, what has worked for that brand specifically. And again, we have all of our best practices when we're managing campaigns on your behalf. But promoting something for, Supergoop is very different than promoting something for OXO, kitchen brand. It's very different than promoting something for Sephora or Best Buy. So we really, I think the testing and learning mentality and gathering and documenting and continually reassessing those learnings and passing them on to new team members, and again, having your brand's learnings build over time. The fact that this is still just such a young industry means that so many marketers start from zero every time they go to begin a new brand collaboration or run a campaign on behalf of a brand. And it's not the way to go. We've all got to be learning and growing with each campaign that we do.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. You can have your brand playbook. And I think celebrating the quote unquote failures and having them in there. This is what we learned. This is what we tried. And this is how we pivoted.
Exactly.
Moving on to the next question. I think this one always pops up, and it's always such a big question mark for a lot of brands and companies. Can you please provide us with a general idea of costs associated with each influencer tier?
Yes, I can. So again, caveat station nation is that there are so many variables here. There's exclusivity. There is production level. So is the expectation that you're taking a selfie and that's going to be the time investment? Or are you asking someone to develop a recipe and they're going to have to go out and source ingredients and experiment and shoot it all and style it? Is it a video brief? There's so much to it. Usage rights. That said, I think actually one thing that I could also point to is that we have committed to regularly publishing data on payouts. So that's available on our Fohr blog. We have quarterly community reports. And basically we break it down on a CPM basis, which means cost per 1,000 followers. And generally, the CPMs for the much larger influencers are lower because as you start to get to that higher level, the costs don't continue to make sense when you're saying, all right, now it just becomes too big. So as a really high level ballpark, I'd say for macro influencers, if you're looking to partner with them and they have, 500,000 followers, you could probably put a $10 to $15 CPM on that and say that you're probably going to be looking at, what is that math? I'm so terrible. 15,000, yeah, for a post. Versus if you're a nano influencer, the CPMs are going to be higher, but that's because you're also you're kind of paying for the production almost as separate to the distribution in a way. You still have to be thinking about it as like the level of effort and time that's going into it. So nano influencers, it can be much smaller. It could be at Fohr, we really try to keep our payouts now keep it in mind with the actual level of effort that's going into it. But I'd say, there's a lot of nano influencers who are out there still doing a lot of gifted work. There are a lot of partnerships that are in the kind of $500 to $1,500 range of, figuring out what is possible in there. And I would say also that it's okay to put out a bit of a range and say what is possible here. But for deeper data, because there's so much information there to unpack, we do have those quarterly reports available on our blog.
That's brilliant. I love that. I love exposing this conversation too, because I think it's, I think it's one that doesn't receive the airtime. And it's always the question we have in the back of our minds being like, well, how much? From a brand perspective too, a couple things that I've done that's super helpful is I make the bold request and I ask for a media kit and a rate card. So if the influencers you're working with are serious about working with you and truly curious about what a partnership could look like, typically they'll be able to offer their rate card. And sometimes it's hard, this is what the rate is and this is what I will sign for. And sometimes it's, first time out of the gate, this is our first time partnering together. Let's see what we can do. And so there is a little wiggle room. And then going back to, their standard costing structure, that's an option. Then the other thing that I always find the most helpful, and it's just to be super forward, is here's our campaign, here's my campaign budget. And is this something you'd be interested in, especially when you're working with the bigger followership? And just respecting everyone's time. It's another email in your inbox, it's another email in their inbox. So just being super straightforward right from the get-go. We have $10,000 to play with. This is what we'd love to do. Is this something that would be feasible for you?
Definitely. And I think too that it's worth knowing that the costs are still confusing and unpredictable to most people. So it's great to take that approach. And I would also say that if someone comes back who's far and away beyond your budget and you're almost embarrassed and you don't want to continue the conversation, I would also encourage everyone to not just give the thanks, we moved in a different direction, or the no response, and instead say, thank you so much for that information. Totally understand. I think we, are a little misaligned here on we haven't budgeted enough for this type of a partnership, but we love your content. we would love to send you something, or we'd love to keep in touch in case that changes. Because I think there's so much in the industry of brands just going silent or disappearing mid-conversation, when there's still an opportunity to build a relationship with that person in hopes that eventually it could turn into into a partnership. So worth just, knowing that you're not going to look like a loser if you miss the mark in terms of the budget projection, but it's okay to be respectful, be complimentary, and just essentially politely back out, but say that you want to just, continue to be a fan and a follower, and hopefully eventually a collaborator.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anything, if I received that email and I had thousands and thousands or millions of followers, and or potentially, an agency did on my behalf, I would be so hyped that knowing that a brand is excited to potentially work with me one day when it's feasible. So if anything, I think, you're just making a new friend in the digital space.
Exactly. And we all need new friends all the time. That's the whole the influencers field for so many people when everyone was locked down. Everyone, again, that's like why all the attention was on Instagram and on all of these social platforms, was just, you want to be entertained by someone who's going through a similar thing to you. And I think that was a really, really powerful thing that we saw in the influencer space in the past year that we've had, is just that, to me, is such a powerful example of the relationship that influencers have with their audience, in that there is that feeling of proximity and closeness and what feels like friendship in a lot of ways, to be able to kind of have that direct connection and entertainment, and not just, turn to TV that was created in a different time because it's a media form that doesn't move as quickly and that isn't as just directly human. So, it's fascinating stuff.
Sure is. Well, Grace, thank you so much for your time. I always enjoy conversations that we get to have. And I'm just so happy that Fohr and Later were able to partner on such a rich report. So thank you to everyone that joined us. And a little call to action here. So if you haven't received your downloadable report, sign up over on later.com or subscribe to our newsletter. And all of the graphs and stats that Grace and I touched on will be in that report, along with some of the tactical takeaways. So if you are starting out and getting super curious about how to partner with influencers, or what type of influencers would benefit you most for the point in time that you are in your company, have a look at that. And if you need to refer back to this video, I'm sure we're going to be posting this somewhere. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thanks for having me. And thank you and the Later team again for the report. It looks so beautiful. And thank you to everyone for joining again. If you're a brand who is feeling ready to, take things to the next level with your influencer strategy, reach out. If you're an influencer, Fohr has a bunch of free tools available. And hundreds of brand users use our technology all the time to find their influencers directly. We also run our own managed campaigns. So really excited to be on here today, and thanks again for having me. Very proud of the report, and hopefully we'll be able to chat again soon.
You got it. Take care, everyone.